Welcome to the UX Playbook. Today I'm joined by Stacey Mendez. Welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Really appreciate your time. So just wanted to kick off, if we can, a little bit of background on yourself and more importantly, why you've chosen the topic of managing multicultural and also multi-time zone teams as your talking point for the playbook.
Sure. So you probably can tell by my accent. I'm from UK. I'm in London. And to be honest, I think just my experiences of working in so many different countries and with different teams and different people from different countries and nationalities, it just felt appropriate to talk a bit more about managing teams in different countries, teams with different cultures, and my experiences so far and how I've managed to navigate some of the pitfalls. I guess that's what you call it.
Amazing. Well, thank you. I noticed as well that you've worked in quite a lot of positions which have involved, I guess, managing multicultural teams, but also multi-time zone teams with STA travel. And then more recently, I guess you've had an even more multicultural team where you're living in Singapore. So in terms of, I guess, with the first question, what have you found the most challenging aspects of managing remote and multicultural and multi-time zone teams to be?
I think the most challenging thing is really trying to decipher what the intention is of what someone's trying to communicate or say with you. I think that's the biggest challenge. I think when you've only lived or worked in one country, you take it for granted everyone has a similar cultural understanding or behavioral pattern or ways to give information and feedback. And as soon as you start to work or work with people from different cultures and backgrounds, all of a sudden you're faced with this different layer of meaning and different layer of communication that you didn't know about or wasn't aware of. So I guess that's the biggest challenge and growth I've had in these experiences. And I think the other thing in terms of time zone is you have to be a little bit more organized. So if you know you have to deliver something in Australia, for example, or communicate something in Australia and you're based in Europe or the UK, then by the end of your day, you really need to be very clear on what you're going to communicate, because if you're not able to verbally speak with them, you have to do it via email or a chat platform or something. So you have to be very, very organized and very clear, but also not very long. No one likes to read like 4 or 5 paragraphs in an email. So you have to be, very organized and clear with your communication.
Condense it down as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think the thing I've noticed a growing trend, and it's probably been COVID, which has allowed this trend to happen, where companies are hiring the best talent, not necessarily the talent that might be within the same city, even the same country. So over the last 2 years, we've noticed these kind of payroll providers, employer of records, really growing in popularity, because it means that whereas beforehand you would be limited fairly to your talent pool that you have within a radial distance of your office, actually what it means is you've got a lot more freedom to go and explore so many different types of talent and the best person for the job. But as you said, it just brings that extra element of challenge when it comes to managing those teams. So let's say, for example, you're a new manager, or even you're a manager, you've had lots of experience in managing, but you find yourself in this position where you have the opportunity to recruit from a much wider talent pool, find the best person, but they might be from different cultures, different time zones. What kind of practical advice or steps would you offer someone who is new into that experience?
One of the points is something I said before, being very organized with giving feedback and being able to meet a common ground for managing the difference in time zones. If it's something that a manager has never done before, I think the first assessment is to understand how, I won't say open, but how much is your team used to dealing with different cultures and different people from different backgrounds. I think that's the first assessment, because that kind of lets you know how much of a challenge you have. If it's the first time hiring someone from a different country or in a different time zone, then letting people know how that could work and kind of introducing the changes that people might need to make in terms of just like communication changes, behavioral changes, cultural changes in terms of understanding people. I would say that's the practical advice. If it's not the first time, then I guess it's just making sure that you're learning as much as you can how to be very clear and how to kind of communicate empathy and project empathy. So empathy resonates with everyone. Everyone is very understanding. Everyone's very empathetic. Everyone's very patient with each other. I think they're the thing, in terms of practical tips, they're the things I would say to work on and just make sure it's embedded into the team. One other thing is that I would definitely allow more time. So when someone has a language difficulty or a cultural difficulty, sometimes it takes them a bit longer to communicate in a conversation, in a meeting. So just allowing longer meetings just so things can be communicated and allowing more time for preparation. Because what we find is if someone isn't that confident in English, they naturally want a little bit more time to present and communicate what they want to say. And that's usually through PowerPoint or InDesign documents or visuals. So allow that prep time. So that's it.
Perfect. How did you go about evolving your communication style? Was it something that you read on, you gained feedback on, you had, maybe you were mentored? How did you evolve that communication style of yours and that empathy?
I think life taught it to me, if I'm honest. I did a lot of personal development as well, but I think life threw me into the world of personal development. I didn't know that existed, if I'm honest, as a student and my first few design jobs. I didn't know there was a thing called personal development. I just reached a stage in my career where I met people who weren't designers and, what they were doing to find ways to grow. And, someone recommended to do something else, read books. And then I fell into personal development, online courses, network groups, webinars, and then just really understanding actually, dealing with people requires you to be very, very, very empathetic and patient and understanding. And I think that's pretty much how I learned, those skills.
I guess as well, having that natural interest in those people that you're managing, in those different cultures that you're managing. So like one step for you moving over to Asia, because you're working in a more Asian cultural business, allows you just so much more opportunity to kind of take an interest and active participation in that. So I guess it's just, trying to make sure that you can show the people that you're managing that you're actively interested in listening to what they're saying and what they want to be doing as you're leading them.
Yeah, I'll definitely build on that. I think as well, just living in other countries, it makes you more observant and makes you naturally want to understand or just learn different ways of communicating and how people live and how they talk and the things that are important to them in life. I think as soon as you live abroad, you're just thrown into this world of trying to understand someone else anyway, if I'm honest.
In terms of, I guess, bringing this to design, so that's what you manage design teams. So design and research, I take it?
Sometimes research is involved. It depends on what the project is. But for research, what I would say, a lot of the focus when you're designing here in Asia is trying to design things for the Asian market. People all over Asia, pretty much. And I guess that being a Westerner, as I'm referred to, Westerner, someone from the Western world, is trying to understand those cultural differences and how people live culturally, which is a lot more contextual research, contextual studies. So observations, speaking to people, different rituals, different meanings of colors, different meanings of how people live. Like it's very common over here for people to, growing up in the UK, it's quite common for 18, 20-year-olds to move out, go to uni, be very independent. That's just kind of the way the world is in America and the UK. Whereas here in Asia, it's very common to stay at home until you found someone to get married to, which could mean that your independence starts a little bit later in life, and then that changes some of the attitudes towards work or towards, what you expect from your manager or your boss. different level of direction, or feedback needed or guidance needed. So I think just understanding the cultural differences and cultural behaviors and lifestyles definitely plays an important role on what to design for people.
Mm. And how have you set about creating a thriving design culture in a remote environment? What steps have you gone through to make sure that the team is flourishing?
Yeah, so it's changed. If I'm honest, it's changed. At the beginning of COVID, when I was working for some companies in the UK, it was very much jumping on Zoom and having a lot of banter, a lot of kind of off the cuff conversations, make people comfortable, and that's because you have that cultural understanding.
Yeah.
And then when I got the position here in Singapore, it's very, very different. They're very respectful over here, so they don't talk as freely to you as you being their manager or their boss. So it was very much trying to offer different ways to communicate. So if someone prefers one-on-one, some might prefer a group conversation, some might prefer little games. So I used a tool called Gather Round, which I kind of created little games to break the ice and make people feel comfortable. And then they will eventually open up once you kind of break those layers down.
Nice.
So yeah, I think it's just a different approach. Just different communication channels, mainly.
And how different are the working hours? So what kind of time zones are you managing at the moment?
At the moment, luckily enough, everyone in the design team is from different parts of Asia, but they're all in Singapore. But we do have other teams we have to connect with in the US, Germany. Shanghai is the same time zone, so that doesn't really count. So we'll kind of accommodate for those calls. So we'll have calls in the morning if it's for the US, if it's their afternoon, evening, or in our evening if it's for Germany or anyone in the UK. So we'll just accommodate and have flexi time to make that work. And I'm normally the middle person. Again, because of language barriers, cultural barriers, so sometimes the designers feel a little bit shy to talk to someone who's like a VP or a design director in the US or UK or Germany. So I'm kind of like the middle person.
Helping to orchestrate everything, making sure everything's running smoothly.
Yeah, and then I always I always push at the end or in the middle of the meeting to say, oh, guys, is there any other questions you want to ask? Or just to give them that little platform to ask. And if they're struggling to communicate the question, they could Zoom chat what the question is, and I'll quickly try and decipher and then re-explain. Because it's important that they're heard or they have a voice, despite the language difficulties.
In a remote environment, I think with, say, Star, were you doing things like, post-work happy hours or making sure the teams were getting together at the same times? Was that possible with the time zones you were managing at that time?
In STA Travel, it was... So I kind of really pushed to have creative workshops. So what we did is we would have... Luckily, so in the UK, half of the design team was in Romania, so that was a similar time zone. It was just trying to include people from Australia or New Zealand. So that was pretty difficult. So what we would do is we'd set a task, say it could be, go and find 6 new design collections or a new newspaper or a new article or a new design thing that you're inspired by. And we'll have the Romanian guys and the UK guys share in that session. So the Romanian guys will be on Zoom, the UK guys will be in the meeting room. And then we would ask the guys in in Australia to feed back their results. So we'd read it by that morning and then share it and then record the session. I think that's another good way as well, recording the session and let the guys see, because, you can't really accommodate all the time to have everyone in the same meeting. And another thing that's quite common is if you do want to have everyone in the same workshop, is you book it way in advance, like 3 or 4 weeks in advance. And then, people just have to accept that they might be doing a late evening or a very early morning, just so everyone can be on the same Zoom channel talking about or sharing something.
I guess then it's just about trying to be as accommodating as possible. So if they need to be maybe working a bit later, then you give them time, the time back when they can then make up for that. So it's not, and also try to make sure that you're mixing it up. So it's not the same people making the later evenings all the time. you're trying to be as inclusive as possible in terms of everyone's diaries.
Yeah, that too, and making sure it's not the same voices all the time. I think that's another thing, because you have so many different personality types in teams. You have people who are super talented and super amazing, but they're very quiet. And then you have others who are also super talented, but they naturally, like to speak more or say more. And then sometimes, you need to balance it out so everyone gets heard or can feel like they are heard. You don't want the same voices all the time in every meeting. It's not great.
Well, no, exactly. And also then I think the louder voices can overshadow the quieter ones, can't they? And often, especially in remote, I find if you're in the same room, you can often read the room. But if you're remote, and maybe some people have got their cameras turned off, some people have got their cameras turned on, some people are naturally louder, some people aren't. So I think it's just trying to pick up on and being mindful and observing and thinking, okay, well, I haven't heard from this person, so maybe I'll just maybe direct a question towards them so that then we can start trying to get them involved in the conversation as opposed to it maybe being ruled by the louder voices in the group.
Yeah, that's true. I also think as well, it's taking the time to get to know the personalities and the strengths of each individual designer. That's a key thing, because sometimes you can throw a question to one of the designers and they feel put on the spot, and that makes them very nervous, and then they clam up very, very quickly. So sometimes it's kind of knowing a little bit of the subject, and if they definitely have something they can bring to that subject. And their personality styles. I mean, you mentioned a good point about the videos being on and off, and I think if it's a session that's planned in advance and we know it's like creative sharing, everyone's going to come and talk, then we do prefer to have the videos on because everyone's going to say something. But if it's something like a design feedback or design review, it's okay to have the videos off, because some people, you can tell they can't understand what's being said, or so it's just kind of trying to balance and not be too disappointed if everyone's off or everyone's on in videos, but also letting people know we might need the videos on for this meeting, so just be prepared. And, sort out if you're worried about your house, sort out your background and stuff like that, and your hair and whatever you need to do. So there's no surprises.
And what tools have you found have worked really well for you managing remote teams?
I think the best is, everyone uses Slack. Slack's really great for just like instant communication. So it's really good because you can have little mini groups, right? So you can have groups based on projects, you can have groups based on like common interests, and you can as long as you build it up and you gain momentum, so everyone feels open to communicate, they can be really great, really empowering. So I think Slack is really good. I tried another tool before, which was Basecamp. And Basecamp it's not an official project management tool, but it's really good for allowing people to give feedback, see other projects, and give emojis. Especially when you're a designer, again, English might not be your first language. The power of emojis really, really helps, because if you say, oh, I'm not sure about that design, someone could read that as they don't like it, and if you put a smiley face, all of a sudden it kind of makes that not into a negative feedback or so I think Basecamp is really good for looking at projects, giving feedback, but also having that emoji personality in it as well.
Nice. Any kind of like Miro or Mural or those types of tools?
Yeah. We use Miro. Miro is good as well if you're doing an interactive session on the spot. You can do crazy things like the designers go and put all their sketches or all their renderings or their visuals, and then you can have like stickers to say, let's do a vote, and we could do like a little countdown timer, like 10 seconds to vote, and make it really, really fun and lighthearted instead of this like really intense, life-changing decision. You make it fun, people can kind of feel involved and, feel connected, which is pretty cool.
Nice. In terms of the teams, like, have you got any boundaries in place in terms of encouraging the team to ensure they're switching off? Or how do you go about ensuring that, they're not on all the time, always working, worried about them getting burned out?
Yeah, that for me, that's a massive thing, especially here in Asia. I think that the way that people are here, they naturally want to give their all and do their best all the time. And they really work to such a high standard. So as soon as I realized that, I was like, oh, yeah, that's great. But, I don't want you working until 1, 2 a.m. or midnight every night, because then you're just not that creative. You're not that effective. The next day, you're kind of half tired. And by Friday, it's like, you might have done the hours, but there's nothing like valuable, productive there because you're pretty tired. So I always make sure, for me personally, whenever I'm giving feedback or any kind of like in emails or Facebook, I try and do it within the working hours. Unless it's something to like my boss, then I would after work or the weekends is fine. But if it's for my designers, no, I don't want. I want to kind of portray or role model that behavior of after work you switch off. There's your family, your friends, your sports, whatever. So I always encourage, and same, because when I first started, I used to get emails at 10, 9 at night, and I wanted to reply, but I purposely didn't. And then I 9 a.m. I'm like, oh, I saw your email. Yeah, okay, let me just reply now. And that's like, and I think they were a little bit surprised because everyone in Asia, they always constantly respond immediately.
Yeah.
And I just said, look, the reason why, because if I responded there and then at 10, I know you would go away and start designing. And I don't want to encourage that. You should be with your husband or wife or kids or, so I've waited till 9. So you've got no choice but to wait and just leave it, switch off.
Do you, I guess that's leading by example to a degree, isn't it? So you're purposefully allowing them that time. Like communication is being very open and honest, which is really important, because then you're kind of setting out your boundaries, but you're also not falling into the trap of then replying and then giving them potentially work to do.
Exactly. I mean, when it's something urgent, like if I know we have a deadline the next day, then I definitely will. But when I know, if I know in my heart the deadline isn't for like another 3-4 days or 2 weeks down the line, I just leave it and say, guys, let's talk about it in the morning. Or in the morning, I saw your email. I'll kind of have that approach. And it's also the same for like meetings. I'm very conscious of having meetings like within the last hour of the day.
Yeah.
Because I know there's a tendency when, again, cultural differences, language differences, the meetings can take a bit longer and run over, by an hour or an hour and a half, just because we're trying to get that interaction. I always try and, an hour before the end of the day, I'd rather not have a meeting because it's likely to run over, and then, it's again, encouraging people to work late and get burnt out and stuff like that. I don't agree with that unless it's urgent for a deadline.
How long did it take you to embed those working practices with the team to actually make a difference, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, if I was in the UK, that would be no problem. I think in the UK, it's very much, no, it's 6 o'clock now, we're going home and everyone goes have their pints or whatever, like they finish. But here in Asia, I think it's taking time because they always want to do well and do the best. And there's this mindset of, if I'm working like as their boss or their manager, then they should be working too. So I know you asked about remote working, but one of the advantages is they can't actually see if I'm still on my laptop. If I log out of Zoom or anything that's got me alert or active, they don't actually know that I'm working. So that's good, because then they're like, oh, she's not working. Okay, well, I can stop.
I guess that's the thing, isn't it? With managing remote teams, multicultural teams, it's like a constant work in progress. There is no finish line, really. It's just you've got to keep on working at it, keep on trying your best to do the best you can with the team you've got. You may always have those people who continue to work late or continue to put in the hours, no matter how hard you try for them not to. But it's just about trying to be as mindful as possible that you've got different personalities, you've got different, like you said, you've got different people who like to work in different ways. And then it's about having the emotional intelligence to try and draw the best out of the team you have in the best way you can.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think maybe I didn't emphasize on us enough. I think it really comes down, the responsibility you have as a manager or director or anything like at the leadership level is really trying to understand the different behaviors and personalities of each individual on your team. Because you have some who are, who will work hard, but then they know when to stop. They're like, okay, I've done enough now. I can kind of switch off. Or this is enough until I get more feedback. And then you have others, they're so driven to do well, to constantly improve and grow. And they're the ones that you have to kind of find out about, because you have to let them know, where the boundary is. Okay, well, if you've got to do 5 concepts, that's it. Do 5, don't do 10. Stop at 5. Or if you've got 10, only show me 5, which says to them, they don't present them all and do them all to an amazing standard. You kind of got to let them know, what the boundaries are, what to kind of work with in that time frame. And I spend a lot of time, I do one-to-one, so I get to know my designers through one-to-one.
Yeah.
One of them I said, okay, but the deadlines is Friday, so what could you realistically achieve between 9 and 6 for Friday? And all of a sudden he looked at me and he was like, well, I probably can't do this and this. I said, okay, so what can you achieve? Like, okay, so let's do that. And he was like, I said, no, like, let's just, if that's what you can achieve, let's just do that and we'll see where we get to. And letting them know, I think it'd be different in the UK. I don't think I'd have that type of conversation, but here in Asia, yeah, definitely.
Well, it's been brilliant taking some time to speak with you about it. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on managing multi-time zone and multicultural teams. And thank you very much for being on the UX Playbook. Appreciate your time.
No problem. All the best. Talk to you soon.